45th. She's in the 45th state, or state representative from the 45th district. It's early in the morning for me. Okay. He is a Democrat. So this was really interesting to read. Kathy was born in St. Louis. She did get both her bachelor's degree in math education, not surprising, given her budget work, and a master's degree in curriculum instruction from the University of Missouri, Columbia. Prior to her political career, she taught for 34 years. Sorry, Kathy, you don't look like you have that many.
No.
In Columbia Public Schools. I think she started at 15. She served as the Hickman High School's math department chair before retiring in 1922. She's a national board certified teacher. She's also gotten, of course, awards for teaching. But what's interesting for me, and I do remember, she was president of the Columbia NEA for a number of years, from 2015 to 2021. Again, her leadership skills. So also Kathy's just was reelected. Both times she ran, she had no opposition at all. So she was busy helping others. She serves on the committees of budget, subcommittee on appropriations, education, joint committee on public employee retirement, good luck, pensions, elementary and secondary education. She's a mom and a grandma, and she's a very active member of Moms Demand Action. So I'll stop with that. Thank you, Kathy.
And I'll just say, Kathy, you know the drill. We love to ask questions, but you take us along to tell us what we need to hear from you before we do.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, what a lovely introduction. Thank you, Alice, for that. And thank you all for having me here. And thank you for giving me that award. I was just so taken by surprise. I just don't know if I've ever been surprised so much in my life. I'm not even sure I heard the whole introduction that night, but what I heard was really lovely. David, thank you for all the kind words that you said that night as well. And I don't know, it's just really touching. I know that all of the reps have told you all this before. It's not always easy to be down there in Jefferson City. And when we come back to Columbia and we come back to our people and we feel the love and we feel the understanding and we just get re-energized by you guys, it just means so much. And that was even before you gave me a plaque that I proudly hang in my office right now. And it's right by my desk, so I see it every day, and it just means the world to me. So thank you so very much for that recognition. When you all invited me here today, and I kind of saw on social media too, and on the email, I believe the topic was just like a legislative update on what's happening. And when I started to think about that, that started to make me a little nervous because there's so much going on down there. And I might not have accepted the invitation other than the fact that I know you all are such a friendly crowd. And what I mean by that is there may be bills that are really super important to you and you want to know what's going on in them. And I may have no idea that they even exist. And you might tell me, how do you not know? It's gone through 2 committees already. And that's just because each one of us, I mean, the way they divide up that work is I'm just really engrossed in these committees that I'm on and doing the work that I'm doing. And some things come to the floor and, you know, some of these budgets are like, or some of these bills are like 50 pages long. And then some of them are short, some of them are like 3 pages, and you read it and you think, oh, I got a good idea of this. And then they drop an amendment that's 60 pages long. We had that happen the other day to us. So, and then when it gets changed, I guess I'm also telling you that my memory is not improving as I get older. And so all of that, trying to remember what was a real amendment, what did we vote down, what did we vote up? One of the things that I do down there is I don't know if you can see this notebook. I keep notes about every bill that we talk about. And I do that just because I don't think I can remember as much. So I made sure I brought my notes home with me in case there were bills that you wanted to know about that maybe I could look at my notes and get some questions answered. But I will give you a couple things to kind of think about, and then we'll just open it up for questions if that's okay with you. Because as you said, you all usually have really great questions. In the House, we have 2 bills that have been truly agreed. I shouldn't say in the House, in the legislature. Because to be truly agreed, it means they've gone through the House and they've gone through the Senate. They've both been approved. And it just so happens that both of those bills have already been signed by the governor. So right now, 2 laws have come out of the work that we've done there since January. The first one pretty much is required. The first bill is the supplemental budget bill. And so when we pass our budget each year, just like any organization, things are going to pop up. You're going to have things that you need more money for. Some things are unanticipated. In the state budget, a lot of the times it was, we told you we needed this money, you wouldn't give it to us, and so now we need this money, or we're going to have to cut these programs. And so the supplemental budget this year was $2 billion. And that, I'll make sure you heard me, that was with a B, $2 billion of spending that we did not accurately authorize. I would say most of it is we did not accurately authorize last year. I think this is going to continue to be a trend because a lot of times the supplemental budget doesn't get as much news as the actual budget gets. And so when they're trying to show their supporters that they are cutting money, they're cutting dollars that are really, really needed. And then they can claim these huge cuts. And then the next year around, they will fund a lot of them. So politically, it's really great for them to be able to say that they've made all these cuts. There, just to give you an idea of some of the things that are in there that are kind of really important. The agencies on aging, they have $14 million in that supplemental budget, which is basically just federal money that they can pull down, but we didn't give them the spending authority on. And that's a really, I'm on budget committee, and I know not everybody likes math, so I don't want to make your heads explode or anything, but there's what we appropriate. Like we say, this is how much money you have, but within there, there's kind of the intention that we know you need this amount of money, but you might need some spending authority. So for instance, if there's a program that, like the agencies on aging, maybe we're giving them, say, $50 million of state revenue to spend, but it could be that the federal government is giving them 14 million more, so they need to be able to spend 64 million. So the appropriation needs to be 64 million. They're not really spending $64 million of Missouri money, but they need the spending authority to spend all the money they get. And so what's happening, and then again, I hope I'm not boring you, there's another part of this called lapse. So when we're going through the budget process in January and February, and all the departments come to us and they show us their budget from the year before, we see what they asked for and we see how much money they left on the table. We call that a lapse. Well, that spending authority that I was just talking about, sometimes they don't get all that money in, so they're not going to spend it all. Like they're just predicting what they think the federal government's going to give them in some cases. So it may look like they asked for $20 million and they didn't spend it. So of course, our fiscally conservative leaders will say, well, then we're just going to cut that $20 million. But that doesn't mean the next year that they aren't going to get it from the federal government. So, and so a lot of times that's what's happening too. I'm noticing it happening really badly this year. I'm really worried that next year's supplemental is going to be big. And if we don't get the supplemental right, or we don't get it to the people in time, Missouri's going to miss out on money that could be available because they keep cutting this lapse that really isn't money sitting in account that they didn't spend. It was just authority to be able to spend money that came in, like if they wrote a grant or something of that nature. Another big area that they're funding, $942 million, and I'm sure you heard some of this in the news, $942 million of Medicaid shortfall. So we didn't give them enough spending authority for all the Medicaid coming down. Maybe some of you've heard about the wait lists for those with developmental disabilities and behavioral health services. Luckily, that's all approved in this supplemental budget. And then along the same lines, our people with developmental disabilities, their direct care providers, we've shorted that amount of money too. So it's just heartbreaking when you look even at the supplemental, the shortfalls on some of our most vulnerable populations, which is what we were yelling about last year at this time, is why would you be cutting anything that has developmental disability in the headline? Why would you be cutting anything that has blind people in the headline? And yet last year it did happen a lot. The other big bill that has already been signed on is, we called it our omnibus safety bill. It's been coming through for the last couple of years. Of course, the Senate has made that hard to get it signed, but this year They were working together. And the biggest piece of that gets a lot of the press, and I think is also really damaging, is that they're taking away St. Louis Police Department's local control, putting it at state control. There were other really good things in the bill. I mean, it was a really big bill. So, like, for instance, it had a lot of things about reckless driving, or police being able to be at a high-speed chase within cities, things that I think most of us felt were good things. Lots of changes to code that had to do with juveniles, sex trafficking, drug use, and things of that sort. So it's not a terrible bill all around. It's got some good stuff, but there are some really, really dangerous things in there too. And then as far as the third read, so we had 2 bills that had finally passed in the House. So third read means that they are now out of the House and they're heading over to the Senate. We have passed so far 75, which is really great, except that there's a lot of bad ones in there. But it is nice to know that we're being really productive. That leaves, if you're just kind of keeping track, I think there were 1,713 bills that were all introduced in the House, and 438 of those are in committee. We are seeing more Democrat bills in committee than I have seen in the 2 years that I've been there. And so that's really promising. We're not seeing a lot of them come out to the floor. Maybe we take baby steps. Some of them are being combined with Republican bills so that the Republican is getting the credit. And we were given a lot of behind the scenes advice this year that if we wanted a bill heard, just find a Republican who would also offer the bill, and then they would send both of them to committee. And so as long as people are willing to do that, I think that's why we see so many of them going through. And I could highlight some bills that I think are good or bad, but what if it's okay with you, I'll just open it up to questions and we'll play it by ear and see if that comes up.
Well, oh, I see Maria is already with a question.
Yeah, I am very interested in the bills cutting taxes, especially in the environment where we're going to see cuts coming down from the federal level too. Does the budget committee address like future needs at all, or is it just, are you just purely working on this year and what we've got this year?
Well, the budget committee really doesn't consider tax cuts. That's all handled on the floor. So we are only spending within what we have. You know, we use revenue projections that tell us how much money we have. And so those revenue projections are kind of based on a little bit on inflation, a little bit on, like, you know, how the market, how things are selling in Missouri, but it also takes into consideration tax cuts. So we will see our revenue start to diminish. I share your concern. And the thing that is maddening to me, and I hear it on the floor, I hear it in committee, but I also hear it at the federal level, is this notion of if somebody is at least being honest about a tax cut and they say, well, yes, we will have to find other revenue sources, but they aren't at all talking about what those revenue sources could be. And they aren't at all talking about tying it to what we would have to cut that we're spending money on. One of the things in the House, when we do our budgeting, this is just a House rule, it's not a Senate rule, it's called the balancing rule. So if I want to propose something, like for instance, right now, we will be going to what's called big or floor markup on Tuesday. And one of the things that I'm bringing just from our local area, it's not a lot of money, Paquin Towers, maybe some of you are aware of it. They provide services to the people that are staying there, and they just want to be able to kind of catch up and expand a little bit of that case management. And so it's $120,000 that would just help us get caught up on all of the case management at Paquin Towers. But I have to find someplace in the budget that I can take $120,000 from. And that's a hard thing to do because you don't want to cut some of these things that are, you know, really, really important. But the point that I'm trying to make is we have that as kind of a sacred rule in the House, is you don't add money to the budget unless you take money away. And yet we can't get that through their heads when they keep talking about these tax cuts. And I know you all heard it for years, the whole trickle down kind of idea. One of the big tax cuts that they did this year in the House was on capital gains tax. And the reason that they thought that that was important is because they want to bring retirees to Missouri. And how it's so important that the retirees are going to move to another state if they can have, zero capital gains tax. They won't come to Missouri. And we can go down the rabbit hole of why we think that this is good, why we think retirees are going to save the day on the other end of the budget if we don't tax their capital gains. But it is really hard to convince them of that. And I probably didn't answer your question other than just share your concern that it doesn't make sense.
There is a follow-up, though, if you can discuss or make any kind of prediction about the elimination of the state income tax.
Well, it's kind of the same thing. It's something that Kehoe has said he's committed to, but he has not yet talked about how he'll replace that. We've heard several bills on the floor this year about personal property taxes being eliminated. And to me, that's a little even more frustrating because we're not even making laws about the money that we're going to spend. Now we're making laws about the money our municipalities and our counties are going to spend. Yeah. And that just doesn't seem right at all. But there's lots of talk about that. Yesterday, I think on the floor, we heard one about limiting whatever you buy your house for, that appraisal rate is what it stays until you make improvements to your house by more than 50% or you sell it. Now, so, somebody made a really great argument on the floor about how he's lived in his house for 25 years and it's almost doubled in what he paid for it in that time. And it doesn't seem fair that his neighbor, who has pretty much the same house, but they just moved in last week, is now going to have to pay twice as much in property taxes as he does, even though they're enjoying the exact same services from their community. But they just do not seem to sway at all on those arguments.
Please get your questions together, folks. I do want to say, Kathy, don't worry about boring us with budget talk, because I think you're one of the best on this, making it simple and clear. Probably your long years of teaching, at least good enough for me, and I suspect for most others here. I just have one thing heavy on my heart, and I'm not asking you to betray any confidences, but we always want to hear from Adrian. How's he doing? Are you you got a tight group there, you work together?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of details to share about it, and everything I have to share has already been public, so I don't think I'm going to be breaching any confidence there, but I think he's doing well. When I talk to him, he seems like he's in really good spirits. I know that I had an open heart surgery a few years ago. Maybe some of you in the room are part of the Zipper Club as well, and it's quite something. And even though you think you're recovering, you really don't know you've recovered till about 2 or 3 years down the road, right? But everything's been good. I don't think he's had any kind of complications or anything of that sort.
Good. Well, that's good advice coming from you, that we should be patient so that he can be too. Because Adrian is such a go-getter.
I know. Somebody made the comment how now he won't be here this week, but we're trying to arrange rides. And I looked at that person and I said, he doesn't need to be going anywhere. And it very well could be Adrian that was the one saying he'll be down there in a few weeks.
Kathy Jensen.
My question is, I didn't understand maybe it's covered by the supplemental, but I didn't understand what happened with the shortfall, that large shortfall in Medicaid, for example.
Well, are you talking about that happened basically earlier in the year, like in the summer?
Well, you had mentioned a large amount that was a shortfall for Medicaid, and I didn't know what was done to deal with that.
Well, that's what the supplemental will help. But I think a lot of people have been waiting on that supplemental. I know particularly the wait list that I referenced earlier. I know family that had told me that when they called in to try to get qualified for some of those services, they were told that they weren't even adding new people to the program. And so I guess at the heart of what you're asking is what creates that problem. And what creates the problem is these people sitting in a budget room deciding that we're only going to have so many people qualify for a certain service. And after that, we just turn people away. And instead of honoring the department's requests. So the departments are the ones that have a better idea of of how many people might need a particular service. And then that's what they present to us as their budget request. The governor looks at it next, and the governor then gives his recommendation. And, you know, a lot of times the governor is just going to honor what the department is asking, but it kind of depends on the department. In education, as you've probably have all heard, they did not recommend to fully fund the foundation formula. Sometimes some of these services that I'm talking about, that people with developmental disabilities really took a hit in the budget last year. And it was just basically because the group of people in power decided, you know what, we're just going to limit those services. And so limiting the services either means making what the people that qualify, what they get more limited. And sometimes it just limits the number of people. And so it's kind of different ways. And the people that are leading those budget talks, they get really creative with how they limit that money. You know, sometimes it's like a rate, like for instance, for the direct care providers, they can limit the rate that they're making. And, you know, that does a couple things. Of course, it reduces the amount of money that we have to spend. But then you also have a lot of people that leave a certain profession because they're not making as much money. And then, of course, the demand is going up and there's nobody to fill the position. And so, of course, the amount of money that's being spent goes down. So that there's a lot of sneaky ways that we get around that really, they just really are heart-wrenching because, you know, we're not doing that with our economic development budget. We're doing that with people who have real needs in our state.
Pam. Pam,
We need
yeah.
to talk about the foundation formula and what they're doing to our public schools.
Oh, yes. Well, you know, one of the bills that passed through the House, and I know is heading to the Senate, is the open enrollment bill. And so I'll start with the second part of your question, what are we doing about public schools? And that is continuing to just drive that bus down the reform education route. And that idea is to have more choice in schools. And so it's a three-prong approach. There is the charter school expansion, which we saw pass through for Columbia last year. Then there's also the open enrollment bill that's going through. And then the other part is increasing vouchers, which they did last year as well. And they're continuing to do this year. So some of those things require more money, some of them don't. They are still pulling money away from public schools on all of those. The foundation formula this year, and you know, as I was getting into the weeds in the budget, I hope I don't get too far in the weeds for you on the foundation formula, but one of the big drivers is called the student adequacy target, where they take our highest performing schools in the state and they look at how much money it costs those schools to get the results that they get. And they do a little magic with the math there, and then they get a number. And this year, the number that we're paying on this year is $6,760. That is a per student number, but that number also has a lot of other things that go into the foundation formula. It's higher for students who have special needs because they tend to be more expensive to educate. It might be higher. It's affected by the local effort, how much a community is putting forward. It's got a little bit of inflation in there because some communities are more expensive to live in than others. But at least if we use that number 6760 as our anchor, the foundation formula, the calculation for the SAT was supposed to go up to like $7,100 this year. But it had gone up a lot last year, and it was going to go up a lot this year. And so now all the Republicans are saying, oh my gosh, the foundation formula must be wrong. It shouldn't be increasing this fast. Even though it only went up like 16% in the last 20 years. So they weren't yelling about it being bad when it wasn't increasing, but now that it's increasing, we are alarmed about that. So Kehoe has said he is not going to fully fund the increase to that formula, kind of insinuating that that SAT calculation is flawed and that it needs to be looked at, and they want to put a new committee together. So that's how they're kind of staying with the same SAT as this year, which is still better than it's been. But really, our schools should probably be getting about $200 million more next year than they are. The part that bothers me being on that committee of appropriations for schools is, I mean, that bothers me enough that they took out the $200 million, but there were so many good programs they did not fully fund. And we're just like really having to fight to get those programs in. I know some of you are former educators. There's a Missouri leadership program that has had really great effects in better preparing our principals. There's a Missouri teachers leadership program. They finally funded that. There was supposed to be $5 million to go towards literacy coaches. At first, he didn't fund it. He put 2.3 million in. These are programs that have been established and vetted and have statistics behind them that are putting forth really positive results. And that part bothers me almost more because it's not that expensive for them to fund it. And so to cut both, it just is like the 1-2 punch.
I'll ask for Nancy's question now, and then we have a couple from the chat. Nancy Copenhaver, you probably know, is our neighbor from Randolph County, a great friend and member of our group, and I think she was the rep for a while, so a kind of senior colleague of yours.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to keep on with the education stuff. So you don't think that there's a chance that the Senate might put that 300 back into the foundation formula?
Actually, I'm hearing they will.
You are?
Yeah.
Okay. And then what about the 50 million for private schools coming out of general revenue? I know that's a priority of the governor's. Where do you think we're going with that?
I have not heard any conversations about that as far as like, will the Senate help? And maybe if you all aren't aware, I mean, I think Nancy's alluding to it as well, is that in the House, the House has a tendency to just want to cut everything. And they use that balancing rule as a good excuse to not let us add too much in. But then what we do is we just give all the budget power over to the Senate because it's like, raining money over in the Senate. They just put all that stuff back in. And I will say that I think Lincoln Huff does a pretty good job of balancing the political divisions of a lot of our budgetary items. So he brings back a lot of things that are good services for Missourians at the same time, making his base happy. So I have heard the foundation formula probably will go to be funded. I haven't heard about the 50 million. And if you all aren't aware of what Nancy's talking about, what I call vouchers, they don't like to call them vouchers, but it's where you can apply to get dollars to be used for your child's education, has always been run in Missouri as a tax credit program, which is kind of, has always been their way of saying, no, we're not taking money from the foundation formula or schools. We're not even taking money from general revenue. This is a tax credit program. People are choosing to put their money there, which is already kind of veiled of whether we're using state money or not. But now they've just taken the veil completely off and they are just putting the $50 million in there. Last year in that Senate Bill 727 that maybe you all remember was a big education bill that expanded charters in Columbia. One part of that was to increase, I believe it used to be $25 million was the tax credit cap. And they increased it, I think it was to 75. I can't remember if they increased it by 50 or increased it to 250. But they increased the tax credit, thinking all this money is going to flow in. But from what I've heard, I think it's only like $23 million has been collected that way. And so this is kind of the governor's way of saying, we want more people to access that program. So we're going to put general revenue into it. But part of me thinks, I mean, if we're living in a super majority state and they think they're making this decision that everybody thinks these vouchers are great, but they can't get $75 million worth of donations from their base to it, it kind of makes me think that maybe it isn't that great of a program to begin with, because they can't even get their supporters that are spending so much money for them to put their money into that tax credit program. So that's where that $50 million will go in.
My first question, I think, might be simple. It's from Schneeberger. I'm assuming it's Peter, and I'll read it. I saw a bill that creates a Bitcoin reserve for Missouri, but it also makes Bitcoin legal tender to pay taxes. It just seems like such a giveaway to Silicon Valley billionaires. Is there any chance that will move forward?
I don't know. I remember hearing about that one as well. I have not tracked that, so I don't know where that is at. We do have a lot of, silly bills out there, and sometimes it's hard to tell what both sides think is a silly bill, because sometimes, we will think it seems a little nutty. And then next thing you know, it's had 2 hearings and it's headed to the floor. But I don't know about that one.
Okay. Let's see one from Al Tacker.
Yeah. Can you talk about the efforts to overturn the citizen vote on minimum wage and sick leave?
Yeah, so that did pass through the floor, pass through the House. I can't remember if it was this week or last week, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
The biggest, if I remember correctly, the biggest part is the sick leave that they wanted to get rid of. And then they also wanted to get rid of the inflationary change to minimum wage. So they were okay with, creating where it started, but not allowing it to grow. And that was just such an absurd debate to hear some of the things that they said. They just did not make sense. I mean, one of their talking points is they said by giving sick days, it's going to make people who are sick want to go to work. It's like, no, that you got that wrong. That's the opposite talking point. But they, I think the chamber was really behind that. They've got a lot of small business behind that, and they felt like that was really important. We had some really good people on our side. One gentleman got up and went through and talked about, he named everybody in the chamber who won their election by a smaller margin than what that vote was. And then, I mean, it was pretty great. And then asked, do you think that means that those voters didn't know what they were talking about either? Maybe we should repeal all of those elected representatives and have re-elections for them. So.
Oh, I like that story.
Yeah.
Now I've got a very complicated question, and we depend on you to help us with these complicated things. It's the one that I wanted to ask, but I'll read what David Mallory wrote. I've heard that some of the savings from the federal budget by that dodgy group is to push things back to the local and state control. For instance, the elimination of the Department of Education. Have you heard of Missouri having to raise more funds, maybe even taxes, to compensate for the loss of federal departments? We think of education first, but there are many others. And I guess what I'm wondering is either things you've been talking to people about or your own thoughts on what we expect, over the next 4 or 5 years that we have to deal with these threatened changes from the federal level that we've been depending on for the last 10 years.
I really wish I had a good answer for you. I really wish I could tell you that we've been notified about what's going to happen, but we just don't know anything. Every piece of information I hear about what's happening at the federal level is probably coming from the same news sources yours is. There has not been, I can't think of anything that we have gotten by email or by direct talking points that lets us know how our state is going to have to respond to some of the madness that's happening at that federal level. Even during the budget process, while these cuts were happening, there's no plan B. Like, we are not looking at any part of our budget and saying, well, as long as this funding is still available, this is what we're going to do. If the funding stops, this is what we're going to do, which it kind of, in some respects, it feels short-sighted. But I also am not sure that we would know. How are we going to know exactly what's going to not come through? To your point, though, David, about, like, I think of Department of Education, which I know a little bit more about. They wouldn't be able to just cut all of those services that cost money. Like, let's just say that Trump couldn't do it by executive order. Like, for instance, the special education funding, because all of that would have to take acts of Congress in order to do. And he has even said that is not his intention. So if that money is safely really going to come down to the states, I guess in that respect, that's good. The part that's not so good is the fact that we have nobody providing oversight to make sure that money is, correctly distributed. We have nobody who is at the federal level really helping all states kind of help each other to be a network for kind of communication between those sorts of things. And so, of course, I mean, I know you all know that that's worrisome, even if it's just not about the money and not about the services. There's a lot more that those government entities are doing than just writing checks and making sure that people are taken care of.
If I'm understanding you, then with a lack of federal oversight and enforcement, then we fall back on a whole lot of higgledy-piggledy lawsuits, and it's just an expensive mess. And
Yeah.
And I like your point. Why should we spend all our time trying to anticipate what they're going to do when we have other things to work on that might bring something? But I just wondered, I think we're just looking for any talk about, what we would do, how we could handle this. And
well, and something to think about too, that, I was talking earlier about how the way the budget works, how there's that spending authority to be able to spend other money that comes in. A lot of in the budget as well there. So it's kind of like a little bit of a matrix, not only do you get to decide what you're spending your money on, you get to, we give them authority over what funds can be used. So there's like general revenue, we call GR, then there's federal funds, and then there's what we call other funds. And so those are like almost like little accounts that Missouri has created for money for specific things. Like the marijuana money is a good example. It goes into a certain fund. It can only be used for certain things. So if the federal government were to come along with something that we appropriated money for and say, nope, we're not sending that money down to you, that entity doesn't just to get to spend that entire appropriation that I talked about, because that source of funding is not there anymore. So we really haven't given them the authority, even if they wanted to try to make it up with state money, we haven't really given them the authority to do that. And, maybe Nancy or somebody else knows. I don't know what would happen if, say, come August, that we lost a big chunk of money and Missouri needed to react to that in a budgetary way. I don't know if we reconvene budget. I don't know if we just wait till the supplemental. It would be fascinating to see how that happens.
Well, I thank you for explaining. I'd heard it before, but I keep forgetting how that supplemental works. I really appreciated that you got that important point in. The $2 billion, if I'm remembering right, is almost 20%. No, almost. 30 billion is your overall budget. Is that right?
I think it's closer to 51 or 52.
51. Okay, so the 2 billion is not as much as I thought of the percentage wise. Okay. The next from Mr. Schneeberger, it's something that comes up many times, and I was reminded of it when you talked about the attracting retirement people. That would be of interest to Southwest Missouri, I'm sure, and maybe not every area of the state. But he said that he's been seeing that MSU and MU are being pitted against each other for funding. Have you been hearing about that recently? It's not the first time this has happened.
I am not seeing that on the funding level, because they are kind of funded from different like they're in a little bit different pockets, and each of the universities have their own little spot in the budget. And for the last I don't know how long ago it started, but there's kind of been these agreements within the schools of how they split that money up. Now, the university is different than COFI, I think is what it's called. I don't know the acronym, but it's like four-year universities that are not the university. So there's the university, there's the other four-year universities, and then there's the Columbia College, or I'm sorry, the community colleges. I always call our community colleges Columbia College because my brain just goes there. But so the COFI, the four-year people, they've decided how to divide up the appropriations they get, and the community college people, they've decided how to divide up theirs, and then the university gets its own. But as far as I've been there, they really just get a percentage increase. And so it's been the same percent across all of them. In the House, there was an amendment to try to increase the community colleges by a 1.5% more. It passed in one of the small budget groups, but it didn't pass in the big budget group. But it could be maybe what you're hearing about is the degree granting program right now in Missouri State University are really kind of going at it in that regard. And, I'm going to be very biased in and this is not a partisan thing. It may be more of a geographic thing than anything. So I'm going to be definitely biased towards the university. And of course, all the research that I have seen on that is that this is a much more effective way for a state to allocate their secondary funding. And we're talking particularly about those professional degrees like doctor, lawyer, pharmacist, engineer, those sorts of degrees. Not all universities in the state are allowed to give those degrees. Actually, MU right now has first right of refusal. So they are the ones that pretty much get to grant those degrees. And the other, basically Missouri State, is trying to take that away from them. And as they're trying to take that ability away from them, of course, they're getting the other colleges to join them because, you know, they're saying like, I want to have an engineering school in Southwest Missouri, and I want to have a medical school someplace else. But it's so expensive to run those programs, the research element that's involved. And when you think about the national grants that you get, when you start taking that pot of money and you start dividing it up, all it's going to do is reduce the state support or put more of a demand on state support for our universities, where right now it's all collected at the University of Missouri. And also keep in mind, the University of Missouri partners with a lot of them. So there are
Yes,
programs
yeah.
where you can get a degree down at Missouri State in, I'm not sure what fields are down there. I don't know if it, I don't want to misspeak, but you can get a degree in something. It will say the University of Missouri on your actual certificate, but they partner so they have that oversight and they can help control the quality of the program better. And then they also can be more efficient with the use of funding. And maybe some of you have some more to add to that.
Well, Peter is ready to put his 2 cents in now.
Okay,
Yeah, can you hear me, Kathy?
I can.
Yeah, okay. So you're absolute, everything you said is perfect. And,
Good.
but one thing that's going on is by getting these other programs, you were saying that Mizzou has its own set of money that's their own. They will be able to increase the size of their student body, which will let them move into that same category and be eligible for that set of funds that is currently limited only to MU. So that by growing in these programs, they will grow in size and they will meet the criteria to get the money that currently MU is getting. So that is how they will become able to steal money from Columbia.
Oh, are you saying in those programs are just growing? Oh, I'm sorry. Let me just turn that off. Are you saying growing in that program or in the total student population?
Well, if they add those programs, then they will be able to grow their their total student population to an extent that will let them get into that same category that currently only MU is in, so that they will be able to be accessing the same pot of funds that currently only MU has access to. So
that's good to know.
Yeah, that is a very strategic move by the, I mean, apart from just competing on more programs, they will actually grow in enough size to change their category of funds that they're seeking from. So that is
well, even as you said that, I was thinking, well, surely there wouldn't be that many people signing up for those programs. But to your point, they might sign up at the undergraduate level knowing that program is there too, right?
Yeah.
Well, some of these programs are very popular, like the undergraduate business program has, you know, hundreds of students at MU. So so this is actually a very strategic move. And my understanding is that Lincoln Huff has this underlying plan for growing St. Springfield, which is,
of course,
you know, they're already well ahead of us. They don't need this extra benefit. We are going to be in big trouble, you know, if MU goes into shock from these federal grant cuts and we lose money from the state, we're going to be in big trouble.
Right. And there's also the background that I keep hearing that when they wanted to change their name to Missouri State University, that there was a handshake that was done that they wouldn't do this. They wouldn't go after these degree programs. But that's what, you know, kind of happens with term limits, is that the people that shook hands back then, you know, are not around anymore. And the people that are around now aren't respectful of that agreement that was made.
When I was a faculty member at Truman and very active on the statewide faculty meetings, we went through these, including that handshake time and the name change, both at Truman and at Springfield. And you know, I came to really admire all the growth and the things that they've done in Springfield. But the overall thing is, at a time when budgets are being, you know, really stretched and threatened, you want to make sure that you don't make moves that will destroy both of them, you know. you've got to have a plan for the whole state. I would think that would be the interest of the state legislature when it comes to them. So thank you, Peter, for taking me down memory lane on some of those things and reminding me that some of these things never go away. Kathy Jensen.
Kathy, what do you think are some of the really bad bills that are still likely to pass this year?
Well, I can tell you some bills that have gone through the House that I kind of flagged a little bit. There's a bill that reduces the statute of limitations for personal injury claims from 5 years to 2 years, which I don't think is good for Missourians. The other one, we heard one the other day. It's probably not super harmful, but it's just crazy. It's called the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act.
Oh my God.
I mean, it's hard to even get past the words born alive because I don't understand why both words go together. But it's the idea is that if an infant survives an abortion, that then the medical people around have to try to save their life and try to provide the best medical care possible, which was stated over and over and over again that this is already state law. You know, as soon as they're born, they're alive and you can't kill people without repercussions. So it may not like hurt anything because everything's already in law, except that there was some language in there that I felt like, and several people on our side felt like we're trying to get back at that abortion.
Yes.
Like there was most of the language throughout were like, if a child is born alive, blah, blah, these are the penalties of what could happen if you don't take care of it. But then there was also one little section in there that talked about if anybody helped someone with a self-induced abortion by providing them medicine or care or anything like that, that they would be criminally liable. So it had nothing to do with being born alive at that point. It just had to do with abortion. But you know, that one could get some traction. The pesticide bill, which I know there's one that's going through the Senate right now. It already went through the House. And I thought I was just catching up on my newspapers this week. I noticed that there was it might have been in Georgia, that there was a settlement against Bayer for that pesticide. Oh, I see somebody putting their hand, thumbs up, that basically if this thing goes through, that Missourians will not be able to bring that sort of suit. It's just, I don't even get how that is happening. I don't get how we as Democrats are the ones that are trying to defend many of the rural people that voted for these representatives. We're trying to protect their ability to make smart decisions about their own health in the products that they use and being able to seek claims when that falls through. Another one, you probably have seen the DEI bills that have come through, and Kehoe put an executive order out on that, but that executive order will become stronger, of course, if it gets passed through the House and the Senate. Let's see, yesterday we heard they put another bill through reestablishing the Second Amendment Preservation Act. So what the Missouri Supreme Court, I believe, has already ruled that was unconstitutional. So they're just like refiling it again. And if I understand right, that case has not completely resolved itself. So there was also a lot of people on the floor talking about, why don't we at least wait to make sure when it's done before we try one more time to try to do something that we've been repeatedly told is unconstitutional. I'm trying to see if I've got any more on my list. And I know that one of the other things you guys asked about is like what's coming ahead. And I will point out to you that a lot of people talk about, I'm going to call it the spring break curse. And that is that they say if a bill is not moved very far before our spring break, it's not likely to get to the finish line. The amount of time needed to really get it through, it would really take everybody, all of the leaders, Senate, House, Governor, all really on board to get that fast track through. So if we've got bills that haven't even been heard in a committee yet, it doesn't mean they can't get through, but their chances of getting through are very, very slim. And one that we haven't really had a lot of debate on the floor about is we know that they're going to have these intentions to reverse Amendment 3. So I don't know where some of those bills are. And if we'll start seeing more of a debate on that. My guess is that maybe they are still deciding which one is the one that they want to push full.
Amendment 3 was the one on abortion.
Yes, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay. Yeah.
And when I say to resolve that, I am guessing what they're going to have is they're going to put it back on the ballot. Is what they're going to do, because we all weren't smart enough to know what we were voting on, so they want to make it clearer, of course, and ask everybody to vote again. So I'm sure that they're probably just still trying to decide exactly which one they want that to be. Unless the other thing that could be happening that I'm not as familiar with is it could be that it's really been taking a hold of the Senate, and maybe the Senate has already passed something that is coming to the House that I just am not aware of.
Okay, as usual, the questions are coming fast and furious now that we're running out of time, but I think we still have 5 or 10 minutes. Let's go with Evan first in line.
Hello, everyone. Kathy, thank you very much for all of this information. It's very helpful. I was directing this question to Alice's chat message where you say, I don't believe they will revise ballot, eliminate the initiative petition this session because they want to pass their own about an initiative on abortion and minimum wage. So this is a technical question, really, because there's two different things. There's the abortion, that's an amendment, whereas Prop A is a proposition. And my understanding is they can mess however they want to with the proposition, and they don't have to send it to the voters. Whereas the House Joint Resolution, I forget the number, which is to basically revoke Amendment 3, the abortion amendment, that would send it back to the voters. My question, technical question is, does a House Joint Resolution originating from the legislature, does that fall under the initiative petition process, or is the initiative petition process exclusively something that comes up from people gathering signatures? So that's my question.
It's a good question. And I'm sitting here trying to look in my Google Drive because it's one that I asked myself and did a lot of research and made some notes for myself. And now I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but I think it goes through the same process as initiative petition and has the same rules with it. But what I can't remember, I'm assuming it's a constitutional change then, if it's an HJR. There may be somebody else on here that knows for sure.
I don't know.
I'd be happy to, you're correct.
That is a yes.
Correct.
HCR means constitution.
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are some bills that have proposed diverging processes for, and it is already a different process for the legislature to put something on the ballot versus a citizen initiative. Right. So they can theoretically make it a lot harder for citizens to put things on the ballot while not changing the rules for themselves at all.
Right. Because, Mari, tell me if I've got this right, because not only is there the constitutional part that we want to protect, for instance, that I believe is that says has to be a 50% or more of the vote. Right. But then there's some statutory stuff, which makes sense that it would be statutory, that talks about what the form looks like and who can sign them. And we've already passed some bills through the House that are changing that to make it more cumbersome. Something like you have to have been a Missouri citizen for 30 days to be a petition, to get petitions signed. Things that are just going to make it harder. And it kind of goes back to the idea. So that's going to make it harder for the public to put something on than it is for the legislature to put something on. I know it's like can only use black ink or blue ink, and it has to be this size. And you know how when you make copies of copies of copies, sometimes the edges get lost. And so this thing says that a certain part of the edge has to appear on every petition page, and so lots of things that they are already trying to make it harder for the public to do their initiative petitions.
Okay. Well, I saw several questions, but Nancy is still ready to ask a question.
Well, along those same lines, Kathy, the thing we're most concerned about in League is the changes in how what the courts might be able to do to the initiative petition. You know how hard we have fought over the last couple of years to get rid of the bad language and the ballot candy
yeah.
and all of that. But
Yeah.
there is a really bad bill that is just a bill and not a constitutional amendment. So all it has to do is pass both houses and be signed by the governor, that changes the fact that the court cannot rewrite the language until it has gone back to the House, or the Secretary of State has tried 3 different times to rewrite it. And then we have to challenge it, and then he rewrites it, and then we have to challenge. Obviously, this is a delay tactic to keep us from ever getting something on the ballot. And then if we do that, it still won't be fairly written. So that is a really important bill.
And let me ask you, Nancy, are you saying that that only applies to the HJR? It doesn't apply to the other processes?
No, it would apply to both processes.
Okay.
And they have increased, I think that same bill increases the description, the ballot language, from 50 words to 100 words, which is kind of good because it explains a little better, but it also gives them more ways to mislead people by putting gobbledygook in there that really doesn't count.
Yeah. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. I'll keep an eye out for that.
Well, I don't see another question now. And I want to remind you, Kathy, don't come here next time and apologize for taking us into the weeds, because that is exactly what we did to you at the end of this meeting. You get a bunch of league people and others, other former legislators and others around. They want to hear these discussions from you. It's one of the many reasons we love you, because you're so good at helping us figure this stuff out.
Well, I will say that goes both ways. Every time I come here, I go away, I've learned something, and I'm looking something up, and there's a lot to learn, obviously, in this world, and I seek the knowledge.
and you can tell Adrian that you've been discussing all this stuff with us, and that we can't wait to see him back here again. But we will wait until he's got enough time, and he should get his rest. And
you better,
really,
I don't know, this might be the perfect format. He probably could sit here.
Yeah, staying at home.
I got nothing but time, guys.
And you will be seeing people tomorrow, right?
Yes, that's right. 9:30 tomorrow at the library, if you all want to join us.
Another thought, Evan? We have a little time?
Yeah, a quick, to Nancy's point, that's SB 22.
Thank you.
Is the one that is messing with the rewriting of the language infinitely, or 3 times. So anyhow.
Okay. Yeah, that's good to know. Thank you.
And the final is to remind you to call on us, through me and any of the officers when you need help with something.
Okay.
We are.
They can come to minutes.
Yeah. Okay.
One more reminder.
Yeah.
There's a protest on Saturday at Holly's office, and we achieved 150 people last week. So we need more people so we can meet 200 this weekend. Thank you.
And that's 1 o'clock, right?
1 o'clock.
1 o'clock.
I think we'll be reviewing some of these plans through in our announcements after this meeting.
David, I want to say something before people leave. I've been talking to people about 10 calls. Call 10 friends, remind them to vote, ask them to call 10 friends. And Barb's campaign likes it, and they're making a flyer on it. So I want people to spread that. 10 calls for people who won't canvass. We just have to get people to the polls. So I wanted to say it before everyone left.
Turnout is usually the major thing, not so much campaign money, but turnout in our municipal elections, maybe in the others too, but definitely the municipal elections. Thank you, Kathy, as always.
Well, thank you all. Enjoy your weekend.
Put up your announcements, Pam.